Hi, today I'm going to be modelling a relatively low poly whiting to be used in theBlu. I'm going to start by opening up Blender. We're just going to delete the default cube and I'm just going to set the screencast keys to appear so you can see what I'm doing. Next I'm going to pull in a background image just to be used for the modelling, just so we can see what's what, and in this case I've actually pre-prepared an image, slightly edited, that I pulled off of archive.org. What I've done is I've just lined it up, as you can see, nicely along the horizontal plane, just so that it makes it nice and easy for modelling. Now what I'm doing is I'm just going to set it to full opacity so we can see it a little better, and I'm going to set it to only appear on the right hand view, since that's the view we have of the fish here. I'm just going to line up the centre point as well with what you would consider the centre of gravity of the fish, and we could do this later but I prefer to do it now, just one less thing to do later on, and it keeps all our modelling in line with what we need later on as well. Now with the background image set up, we're going to jump into the actual modelling. There are several techniques we could use for the modelling, but I personally prefer to do poly modelling for this kind of thing. So I'm just going to insert a square or a plane, just scale it down a little, just for a starting point really, and then scale it up on the Z-axis. And I'll just restrain that scaling to the Z-axis by just hitting Z after pressing S. And we're just going to line up the top and bottom points with the top and bottom of the fish, just to make it a little tidier. We could do this later on. And now, the next thing I want to do is add a little bit more detail, so I'm just going to press Ctrl and R, hover over a side, one of the edges, and then scroll up on the scroll wheel. Pressing left clicking even to confirm that we get some nice square polygons. And I'll just extrude that one full edge over to repeat the process. And now it's just a case of scaling that up on the Z-axis again and aligning the top and bottom points. Now I'm just going to repeat this process right down the length of the fish all the way up to the tail. What I am going to do is I'm going to speed this section up just so it doesn't get a bit boring. Now we're down to the tail, we need to reshape the geometry slightly, just to fit with the main body of the fish. Not the actual fin itself, but where the body meets the fin. To do that properly, I'm going to use some proportional editing, so I'm just hitting O, just to change the set proportional editing to 1. I'm just scaling that along the Y-axis, and as you can see it gives us quite a smooth, not perfect, takes a bit of playing with, and changing the type of proportional editing as well, but with a bit of playing we get a nice smooth rounded edge, just like so. And that'll do us for now. Just a little more editing, just going to scale these up to get them to fit a little better. Now with that done, I'm going to continue the same process over in the front of the fish. Although actually I think I'll leave this for now just because we're going to have a little trouble with the gills, so we'll come back to that later. What I'm going to do is shape the fish a little better, because as you can see at the moment it's flat, which is pretty useless. So again, using proportional editing, just going to select some of the vertices and drag them along on the x-axis, and using the scroll wheel to set the area of influence, just going to play with it a little bit and see if we can get a nice rounded shape for the side of the fish. What I'm going to have to do actually is change the type of proportional editing, just to get a bit of a better shape, and turn down the influence, just so the tops and bottom aren't quite as affected. And we're getting there, we're getting a little bit of a better shape. Again, as I say, these things just take a bit of playing with just to see what's right. It's going to be different on every single asset. And again with this section, as you can see, I'm going to have to scale down the the area of influence, and again the same on this last part. Now that's not a bad start, but to get a bit of a better idea of what's going on, I'm going to add a mirror modifier. What that's going to do is mirror it to the opposite side along the z-axis, and we'll just get a bit of a better idea of what's what. Now just grabbing the top, just move it along. Oh, it seems we've got something weird going on here, and that's actually because I've left the x-axis mirror on as well. Okay, so trying again, I'll just move the top across, again using proportional editing to meet in the middle. I'm just going to set clipping on. Just what that does is it makes any points that touch between the mirror actually stick together, and it just makes things a lot easier to handle. And I'm just going to move that along. And with a little more tweaking, I'm actually just going to have to deselect these back parts and just scale these down slightly. I'm going to have to increase the area of influence again just so it reaches those polygons, or those vertices actually. And there we go. Not a bad shape, we'll come back to that later. And do the same on the bottom for now. Again, using proportional editing, just dragging those in, just till we get a nice shape. Just scrolling up and down on the wheel just to change the area of influence to see what it looks like. So it doesn't confirm it until we actually click. And just line them all up before we finish it off by just grabbing them all. Just get rid of those back few again because they're already touching, we don't want them. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to extrude these ones here just to keep a bit more of a rounded shape at the bottom, because I think if I pull them all in together it's going to end up a bit pointed. I don't mind having a point on the top because most of the fins will cover that, but at the bottom here, just keep it a bit more rounded, it's just a bit nicer. And I'm just going to remove some of these stray vertices as well, that one at the bottom, and undo the clipping just so I can pull this apart, otherwise it won't let me. And just clean up the shape a little bit. Okay, I think that's looking a little better. Just take a quick look around just to check. Make sure that shape's alright. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad to me. Okay, so I think now I'm going to take a look at doing the gills. Actually, I might have to tackle that afterwards. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue what I was doing earlier and just extrude these out. Just, obviously, extruding them forward this time. Same as before, just extruding it out. Scaling along the z-axis just to get to meet up with the top and the bottom. And just flip to the front view just to see what's going on. That's obviously too wide, we need to start narrowing out towards the front. So again, scaling that along the x-axis. Bring it in to meet in the middle, put clipping back on just to get the top and bottom to stick together. And there we go, we're getting a bit of a better shape. And we'll just adjust this top section actually because it's a bit too pointed. Even with those fins it's going to be way too pointed. So just pressing Ctrl and E to the edge menu and using edge slide that up and move it out slightly. And just do the same sort of thing, just on the length of the fish. Again, just Ctrl and E, slide these up again so they're a bit more central. Keep those polygons nice and square because that's what we need to do. Keep it nice and smooth, better for animation later down the line. And just a bit of a general cleanup now, I think. Okay, so with that looking a little cleaner, I think I'm going to carry on towards the head, just extruding it out forward, just the same as before, and then scaling it down on the z-axis just to meet up with the top and bottom. Just move it down slightly as the whole head seems to move down, and I'm just going to extrude this one to the edge of the eye, and you'll see why in a moment. It's just going to make things a little easier. And just going to hit Z just so I can see the eye through it. As you can see, I've got an edge on either side of the eye. And I just need a little more geometry because what I want to do is I want to cut the eye into the actual mesh. So just using a knife tool, I'm going to cut down the centre of all of these edges just to give me a little bit more geometry to work with really. And I think the next thing I'm going to have to do is I'll add a circle. So just put Shift and A to open up the menu, add a circle, and change the vertices to about 8. That's what the guys over in the Blue Studio recommend. And we're just going to align that on the right plane, just so we can see it from the side angle, and line that up with the eye. Just like that. Scale it down to meet with the outside of the actual eye. It's the eyeball, not kind of the eye socket, if you like. We're going to add that into the normal map later. So just meeting up with the outside of the eyeball. I think that'll just about do it. Maybe just move it over slightly. Now the next step is to, using Alt-M on the keyboard, just merge together the original mesh with the new circle we've just added, just so that original mesh takes on the shape of what we want for the eye. What that will allow us to do is actually, once that's done, cut out the centre of the eye, and it will leave us with a nice perfect circle in our original mesh. So just tidying these up, basically just taking the nearest vertex to the vertices of the circle and just merging them together. So I delete these centre two, and there we go, we've got a nice perfect circle in the eye. And just to tidy things up a little bit, I'm just going to use the knife tool just to get some nice, well, not perfect square polygons, but much more square than they currently are. And just pressing F to fill in those faces, like that. And just going to do the same on this left hand side as well. I can't actually cut it, so I'm going to select these two, add an edge by pressing F. I'll actually just make a face on the whole of that, and then cut down the centre to get rid of the strange end-gone face. And there we go. And I think maybe just one more cut, just about here, just so I've got a bit more geometry to go forward with. Okay, now I'm not going to select all these vertices because I want to select them from the corner of the mouth. I'm just going to pull these forward and work our way forward. Again, just scale them down on the Z-axis, move them down to meet up with the top of the mouth and the top of the head, and continue on forward just the same as before. I'm just going to do a few more tweaks here to the shape of the nose of the fish, or the mouth of the fish, and just align these a little bit more with the rest of the body really. And you can see here we've got a bit of an issue with the eye, and that's actually caused by me placing the circle and snapping the vertices to that. That's simply fixed by taking off clipping and moving it outwards, just as I've done here, and just realigning the rest of the shape of the eye. So you see here I move around the body of the fish quite a lot just to see from different angles what sort of shape it will need to be. And I found that's the easiest way for me anyway. So with the eye now looking much cleaner than what we had before, I'm going to go forward and actually start working on the nose of the fish and actually closing up the front of the face, so at least above the mouth. I'll have to do a little more work on the mouth later. So I'll just speed this section up just because there's no special technique, it's just extruding forward and reconnecting. So with the nose now closed up and mostly rounded off, we're going to move on to the bottom part of the mouth. Now I'm going to keep this bit sped up as well because it's pretty simple, just the same as what we was already doing. The only special considerations to make, because we're actually modelling the bottom of the mouth separate to the top, is to make sure that it all lines up with the top of the mouth, so that we don't have any gaping holes or any major overlaps that just might look a little odd. Got to keep it all looking remotely natural, just as we might find in the wild. So I'm just closing them up here just to get them to meet a little better. It doesn't have to be perfect, we will be coming back to this section. With the mouth now mostly finished, I'm just going to set smooth shading on just so I can have a look around the fish as a whole, just taking in the profile of the fish and seeing if there's any errors in the modelling, anything obvious that stands out. It seems pretty much okay, it nicely lines up with the background image we've got, the fins all look about right. So I'm just going to move on to the eye, and I'm just going to insert this. Just using the extrude, move it slightly back on the x-axis and scale it in. What this will actually allow is for us to put the eye in a little later on without showing through to the back faces of the mesh, which won't actually render. Now what I'm actually going to do is just edit the mouth slightly, just for the sake of modelling and for the sake of the animator later on as well. I'm just going to open it up, and to do that, as you can see, I've just placed the point of origin just at the base of the mouth, set that to the rotation pivot point, and just rotating relative to the screen just by pressing R. And there we go, we just opened up the mouth slightly, and that'll just make it easier to model on the inside, as well as make it easier for the rigger to get the bones in and align them, and especially to paint the face weights to those bones as well. Now moving on to modelling the inside of the mouth, I'm going to speed this section up as well, just because it tends to be a very fiddly and awkward section, for me anyways, just because it's a little hard to see and to get to, so I'll keep this sped up, but you'll get a general gist of the idea of how I go about doing it. So the key is to kind of form a little bit of a lip, depending on the species you're doing of course, but in this case a little bit of a lip, and then to just extrude the insides of the mouth in using as little geometry as possible, because obviously this section isn't going to be used much, so I don't want to waste system resources on rendering this section. It's just to get a general idea really. So with the bottom section done, we'll just move on to the top section, just doing the exact same thing, extruding that in, smoothing it out slightly, and simplifying that geometry as well. So with all of the inside of the mouth actually now closed up and all connected, I'm just going to smooth it out a little, get the shape of that mouth a little bit better. Now we can see what's going on a little better, and we're just going to form a little suggestion of a throat really, and we'll add the rest of that in the normal map. Now moving on to the eye, I'm just going to insert an icosphere and set that to a subdivision level of 2. Now the reason I use an icosphere rather than a UV sphere is I find you can get a nice smooth shape equivalent to what you can get with a UV sphere, but using less tries. So I would say that's always a consideration when you are modelling for a game engine, to save on those tries. Now deselecting all the faces we want to keep, I'm just going to delete the vertices that make up the faces that will be on the back. And moving into the side view, just using free rotate, which you access by pressing R twice. Just going to rotate it to the general shape, and moving around the fish just to get a bit of a better idea of the angle it should be on, and just rotate it a little more. So now it's just about the angle it needs to be at. I'm just going to place it a little better, a little more in the centre, and that's looking pretty good to me. So I think I'll leave it about there. Just maybe tweak it a little bit over there to get it more central. As you can see, it's still flat poly, so I'm just going to smooth that as well, just to get an idea of what it looks like. Now I can see in the wireframe view it's not quite centered, so I'll just move it over slightly, just so that when it rotates it doesn't open up any gaps. And that's about it for the eye. Now the more observant of you may be thinking, where's the gill? So I'm going to move on and actually add that now, just realigning these vertical cuts to accommodate that, and just moving the geometry over slightly to form the general shape of the gill, and adding a little cut here using a knife tool, and a few more here just to keep that geometry nice and smooth. I'm also going to have to just remove these extra vertices and the edges that link to the back of it, so that I can smooth out the shape a little more, and then go on to grab the back of the gill, or the part that forms the back of the gill, and move that out slightly away from the body. Extruding that in so that we have a nice solid edge to the back of it, so we don't have any sharp edges, and again extruding that further in back on itself to form the inside of the gill. With that pretty much formed, it doesn't need to be too deep into the body, just a suggestion of a gill really. And so yeah, with that formed, I'm just going to shape it a little bit more, and then reconnect these faces that I'm just moving here to the existing body. This can prove a little challenging at times because we've added more geometry. We've got a try there that can be closed up because it's unneeded, and here we have an end gone which I'm going to have to cut to get rid of that because we don't want any end gons, we want everything made up of polys and tries really. So with the basic shape of the gills now formed, we're just going to have to do a few edits, moving some of these vertices over just to keep that nice rounded edge of the side of the fish, because we've spoiled that slightly. And we're also going to be taking into consideration the shading of the fish. As you can see here, we've got a few issues with the shading. So to correct that, what we need is more geometry, unfortunately, as counterintuitive as it seems. So I'm going to use the knife tool again, just to cut in more geometry here, and you'll see instantly that fixes a lot of the shading issues. Looking much nicer now than it was. With the gill geometry almost finished, we're just going to move this vertex here because it's causing a strange shaped polygon, and a few other things to clean up. As we look around the fish, we're just looking for any errors in the profile of the gill. Just like here, it's slightly too far away from the body, leaving a gaping hole, quite frankly. So we're just going to close that in a little, and again here at the bottom, the gap between the body and the gill is a little too large, so we're just going to move that in and slightly rotate it just to tidy it up a little. So it's looking pretty good. It's by no means perfect, but we'll come back and tweak these things a little later on. So as you can see now from the side of the fish, it's looking much more like how we would expect. See, the body here just isn't quite meeting up with where the fins should be, so I'm just going to use proportional editing and just stretch that down a little bit. Almost finished with the body geometry now. As you can see, I'm just using Ctrl R to add a lot of loop cuts and the knife tool wherever I need to, just to essentially dice up that body and have some nice square polygons which make much more useful geometry for animating later on. And the only issues that causes, as you can see here, is when you cut the geometry, it doesn't smooth the edges. So I'm just using the scale tool just on the Z-axis to scale that and get it nicely smoothed out. And that concludes this part of the tutorial on modelling the whiting for the blue. We've only covered the modelling of the body so far. In the next part of the tutorial we're going to go on to modelling the fins, and then in further tutorials we're going to go on to creating a normal map through sculpting, and then eventually on to doing the textures for the fish too. Okay, join me next time for another tutorial.